As the Israel-Hamas conflict continues, yet more anti-Israeli rhetoric appears online. I urge you to pay close attention to reports on the conflict and listen to the language used. Recently, Turkish news outlet TRT World Now released an interview with Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, a representative of Naturai Karta, a fringe religious group which formed in Israel in 1938 and which opposes the establishment of a state of Israel until the arrival of the Messiah. To make that crystal clear, TRT found a rabbi who believes the Jewish state should be dissolved. Now listen closely to his comments.
If you could summarize for us your feelings on what's going on in Gaza at the moment.
Well, with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message and sanctifying His name, and bring peace to the world, inshallah, and bring peace to the world, inshallah, and bring peace to the world, inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah is an Arabic word which means if God wills it, and is often used by Muslims around the world. According to comments I found on Quora, while non-religious Jews do sometimes use the word inshallah ironically, religious Jews use two other words, either Be'ezrat Hashem, which means with the help of God, or Ymirtze Hashem, which translates to if God will want. TRT trotted out a rabbi who belongs to an organization which openly opposes the state of Israel and who openly uses a common Muslim religious phrase. Nothing suspicious there. A quick perusal of the TRT World News website shows they are clearly in support of Hamas. Then there was the interview posted to the Katie Halper show. I don't know who Katie Halper is. She has 150,000 subscribers on YouTube, but a quick look at her videos shows she's also pro-Hamas. Here is her guest, Susan Abu-Hawa, a Palestinian-American writer and human rights activist. Abu-Hawa did live in the Middle East, some of that time in Jerusalem, until she moved to the U.S. at 13. She lived with her father for a time, but then ended up in state care. Not exactly a stable childhood. Here is Katie's intro.
You wrote an article at the Electronic Intifada, Israel is on its colonial deathbed. And you talk about unfathomable cruelty that Israel perpetuates, and you talk about state terrorism. Can you talk to us a little bit about this state terrorism?
Colonial deathbed, unfathomable cruelty, state terrorism. She hasn't even let her guest speak yet, and she's already priming the woke language pump. Now let's hear what Abu-Hawa had to say.
I mean, from its inception, this is what, they've been genociding us since 1947. There was no social media back then and no videos that could be taken, but...
Which means there's no proof. If Israel has been genociding Palestinians since 1947, they're doing a poor job, as there are still 1.3 million of them, many of them heavily armed and using those arms to kill Israelis.
Frankly, a lot of us are watching this, and especially like some of the elders are saying, this is what happened to us. This is what they did to us in our village and so. And this is, it's kind of, they're reliving it. And this is what it was like. I think this is what it was like in this country against Indigenous Americans. We're watching a moment in history that represents previous genocides that were not televised.
Now we've got to the comparison to the genocide of Native Americans. And while it is true that American military forces did attempt at times to wipe out the Native population, we here in Canada did no such thing. We gave them land rights and government checks every month. But we're still hearing constantly about the murder of innocent Native children at Catholic residential schools. The only problem with that being that in at least one case, the Manitoba residential school, where supposed graves were exhumed a few months ago to reveal nothing but piles of rocks, the narrative is a total lie. Abu-Hawa is using the same language to suggest unspeakable cruelty to Palestinians, while admitting that, conveniently for her assertions, there's no proof.
Israel is it's a terrorist state. It practices terrorism on an industrial scale. Their terrorism is systematic. It is daily.
They practiced terrorism daily on an industrial scale. According to the Oxford Dictionary, terrorism is defined as the calculated use of violence or threat of violence to inculcate fear. Terrorism is intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. Let's see how that definition holds up against her next statement.
You cannot live by your sword in a region where you are surrounded by hundreds of millions of Arabs and Muslims.
They are living, as Abu Hawa claims, by the sword because they are surrounded by hundreds of millions of Arabs and Muslims who want them dead. If they did not build one of the best militaries in the world, if they did not place spies within Hamas, if they did not use checkpoints and regularly arrest those suspected of planning terrorist attacks, they would all be dead by now. They and their children. I'm not suggesting that I think the Israeli government are the good guys. I reported a few months ago on Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu openly admitting to using his people as guinea pigs for Pfizer. And shortly after the October 7th attack, on the very high probability, in fact almost certainty, that the Israeli government not only knew the attack was coming, but may have incited it through their Hamas operatives. A situation very similar to 9/11, which was politically expedient for the American government, who blew up their own buildings, killing their own people. My point is this. Right now, virtually everything that is happening in the world, and the mainstream messages about it, are being controlled and manipulated by the globalists to incite fear, uncertainty, and division. Especially division. A people divided against themselves cannot stand. The globalists are the true enemy. And if the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then our allies are everyone who is not part of the globalist power structure. This includes innocent civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, who only want to be left in peace to live their lives. Listen carefully to everything you hear. The clues are there for globalist influence. When you hear woke buzzwords, you will know they are trying to influence you. Don't let them. Only pay attention to what can be proven, and then draw your own conclusions.